All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to live session number 2 of our 3-part series for Google Ads automation. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. We have a pretty good showing and people signing on right now. So if you're signing through, feel free to add any comments in the box. People are signing in from where they're from. That's awesome. Great to see. And we'll kick this off. So if you joined us last week, thanks for joining us again. Last week we did resilient marketing, where we talked about a lot of things from understanding consumer behaviors and mindsets to then changing your business and you're pivoting your content and messaging to your users, and then understanding digital marketing goals going forward. So today we're going to kind of take that high level knowledge and we're going to apply it to Google Ads. And we're going to talk about how they especially can be applied for the startup world. And what I mean by that is Google Ads is obviously an extremely complex platform. And what we see from a lot of startups is that they go on, they try it, they waste a lot of money on it because it's a little too complex what they're trying to do. And then by the time that they kind of get it down, they either jump off it and go to other advertising sources, or they come back later once they have more money and they could pay for, an agency or a consultant of some sort. So what today we're going to try and do is knock out some of those myths about Google Ads, show you that it's easy to understand, so that way you have a better understanding going forward of the capabilities that we have to offer. And we're going to do that with this agenda. We're going to start off with some introductions. We have Paul Worrell here with us. He is a Google Ads expert. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. But we're going to first start by talking about the age of assistance and intent. And what this really means is that in the new world now with the age of assistance, the way people are searching for items, the way people are shopping is changing all the time. And there's so many touch points that it's actually getting more and more complex when you're trying to go down the marketing funnel. Because of that, what's happening is our tools are becoming more complex because we're hitting all those touch points and we're capturing a lot of that data. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that age of innocence and intent means. Then we're going to roll into smart bidding, which is our machine learning algorithm that's going to help you navigate Google Ads a lot better. And then we're going to talk about some of the tools that you could tactically use in the platform. And Paul will be there to kind of guide us through these things as we go. So without further ado, introductions. I'm Justin Abazna. Most of you know me as the partnership manager for Google for Startups. I work with a lot of our tech hubs, incubators, and accelerator partners, and to bring the best of Google to our startups. And one of those things is obviously knowledge and resources. This is what we're doing here today with the Google Ads. And I'll let Paul introduce himself. And before he does, Paul's a very humble guy. So I want to make sure that you guys know that his sole job at Google is to onboard new business onto the platform. So startups, new business. Paul, he is the expert that does exactly what you want him to do. So if there's any questions throughout this entire presentation, add them in the chat. The chat's about a 20 to 30 second delay from the live stream, so we'll get to it. And I'll make sure I stop Paul to make sure he answers it. But now's the time to ask him whatever questions you have about the platform, about smart bidding, and about some of the other tools that we're talking about. So please include whatever you can in the chat to make this as interactive as possible, and we can get to answer your questions. So without further ado, I'll let Paul introduce himself.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. I appreciate the intro. And yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm an account strategist on the new business team. And so what that means in more detail is I'm working with businesses that have either never spent or advertised on Google before, or are brand new, or haven't used it in a long time. And over the past year or past 10 years, everything has changed so much. And so what we typically do is we're working with businesses that either they're small startups or they're larger brands, but they're across all different business models. So my team is that first boots on the ground to determine, hey, for one, like, what are your goals as a business? What types of strategies do we need to implement from a Google Ads standpoint? What are the broader things that we need to consider when it comes to marketing? And what are the best ways for us to tactically scale up your marketing in a way that is efficient and sustainable. So we'll jump right into the content then. So before we get into, and what we'll discuss later on in the call is a lot of what we can do within Google Ads that helps to make our lives easier as business owners and advertisers. But before we get into that, I think it's important to set the stage of where we are today in the landscape of the world, and what does that mean, and what type of complexity do we need to consider or navigate as we start to move through executing our marketing strategy. So make sure, excuse me. Perfect.
And if you guys, whoever is on the webinar, feel free to also put in the comments of what verticals you guys are in, so we can kind of also tailor some of this content with some of our examples to the verticals of the people in attendance. And yes, this webinar will be posted afterwards for Louise. I saw that question there.
Awesome. I think I also saw a question from Elizabeth, and yes, I'm from Dallas, but typically based out of New York City. But in my specific role, I specifically work with the Canadian market. So I'm all across the states, and so you can either find me in the north, or sometimes down here in the south where I am now. So before we jump into it, I think it's important for us to revisit, this concept of the newly empowered consumer, which with the rise of mobile, we can now search, compare, watch, buy anything within minutes that we were never able to have that capability before. And so with that, we've all become more curious, more demanding, and more impatient than ever before as consumers. I can't get a show of hands, but I can imagine that many of you have a Prime membership. And so if we think about Amazon Prime and how it's no longer enough to have a delivery of something within a week or even 2 days, that now it's either same day delivery or bust, just speaks to how much we've changed as consumers and what our expectation is for the businesses that we work with. And so what this has brought about is an added means of complexity that's also called for a new age of marketing. And this is what we want to call the age of assistance. I'm trying to get my slides to change. Whoops. Sorry about that. So this is not a new concept. And no longer is it okay for us to just have good quality customer service. It's no longer just enough to only assist the clients that are already paying customers of your brand. And so the brands that we're seeing that are winning in a mobile first world are those that don't just assist their paying customers, but they assist all their customers, even the ones that haven't even spent a dime yet. And so what they do to do this is by anticipating intent and satisfying expectations throughout the entire customer journey. So if we think about an example of this as being Netflix, and one thing Netflix was able to do from a business model standpoint was anticipate the intent of their customers to where customers were no longer going to want to, rent DVDs online, get a DVD every month, but they anticipated that consumers were shifting their media consumption to digest more of that digitally. And that's what caused the big shift that made Netflix to where it is today. And so this is when we think about assistance and helping people throughout their customer journey and what that means in the marketing sense, which is driving growth by anticipating and satisfying that intent. We can see here that it is possible from a business model standpoint, but what we're looking to recommend today is what are the shifts that we can make with our marketing strategy, and how can we implement this kind of approach to better serve our consumers throughout all phases of the life cycle. I'm running into some technical difficulties. So as marketers, we were taught that the marketing funnel is something that we should master. And for most of the components of the marketing funnel, they're still relatively the same, right? There's awareness, consideration, and purchase, but they're not linear anymore. And what we've noticed is that marketing funnels have become more complex than ever before, and that's because they're being redefined by intent. Now, intent is a funny thing because it's not linear, it's subconscious, and it's subject to human fallacy. I intend to wake up in the morning and work out, 30% chance. I intend to book a flight for a wedding in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet because I don't want to book a flight to Manitoba in the dead of winter. So this element of intent is difficult to measure and adds a lot of complexity considering the optionality and the information that a mobile first world brings to us. So a couple quick questions for you to consider. For one, when you think about your own buying experiences and how you engage with businesses, do you, for one, check price before checkout? Do you check reviews, or do you even consider waiting to buy in store before going to the store? Or do you, and now in the current circumstances, are you checking to see if there's a alternative delivery option or even curbside pickup? So if we think about this and just how intent has shifted over the past few months for us, we can see that intent has clearly redefined the marketing funnel. And in fact, most customer journeys don't even resemble an actual funnel anymore. They look completely different. They look like hourglasses, they look like diamonds, pyramids, pinball machines. Today, people are not necessarily following a linear path from awareness to purchase, but as people check their smartphones, their tablets, their laptops 150 plus times a day, they interact with new pieces of information, new competitors that are relevant to your business, new options, prices, reviews. And so their consideration set is widening and narrowing many times before they actually consider pulling the trigger. So with that, we understand today that there can be hundreds of touch points that a consumer can take within their customer journey. Now, this, as a business owner, as a startup founder or a marketer or as an advertiser, this may come as intimidating, but this really should be sought out as an opportunity. While this presents a challenge, it means that we need to evolve our formula for growth because now more than ever, the consumer is in the driver's seat. Each consumer has multiple touch points with brands, and they may not move directly from research into purchase. And so the next step for us as marketers is to figure out how can we better serve our customers throughout every touch point. Now, people are choosing to engage with and eventually purchase from brands that are relevant, helpful, and personal. Meaning it's not only enough to only serve, as I mentioned, the customers that you're already serving, but to be there throughout every step in that journey. So consumers are demanding assistance in their daily lives, whether they choose to, whether for those that choose to ensure that brands offer it as an opportunity to make a bigger impact on the consumer's lives or the customer's business, and on your own bottom line as a business. So the great news is that intent is everywhere, and people are sharing it whenever they pick up their smartphone, tablet, or laptop. So how do we?
Well, I just stopped right there. That's a great point. So before we dive into like capturing and using intent, to summarize, just for my sake and for the startups, there is a ton of touch points. Intent has changed and is continuing to change because of all the different touch points, like checking which types of services, bidding, pricing. Do you see this as an advantage for startups, or do you see it as a disadvantage in the sense that the bigger player is going to just be able to swoop in and kind of dominate all those different touch points very easy because they have a lot more money? Or is it more of a performance game?
Definitely. Yeah, Justin, that's a great question. And what we found is when we think about how traditional advertising used to be, marketing and the attention of consumers used to fall only for those that could afford it. Those who could do big, massive TV buys to where smaller businesses would have to try to shift their focus towards guerrilla marketing tactics and small publishers to be able to get their name out in a small way. Now that we've found that with the expansion of digital itself, mobile, social media, and all the opportunities that a data-first world has provided, there's now more opportunity than ever before. There's a increasing amount of attention that's out there. And if we think about, if you were tuning into our session last week around how COVID has spiked the rise in content consumption within itself, there's more demand than there ever has been for new products, new services, and solutions that can help people's lives and that consumers are now looking for. And so now as a startup, this gives you more of a leg up to be able to cut through the noise and find not just everyone and anyone who's available to bring to your website or to your business, but to really identify which customers are going to be the highest value within that larger sample set, to really put your marketing dollars in a place that is going to be most valuable to your business. So to answer your question, Justin, there's actually more opportunity than there ever has been before.
Awesome.
Cool. And so, to answer that question, how do you best capture and use intent? So let's bring this out down to the ground here. I feel like, we've discussed a lot of the high level stuff. So how do we best capture this, and how can you as a marketer capture intent and use that to gain, share of wallet, win the minds and hearts of your customers, and move forward? So a few years ago, this actually used to be a very simple process. This used to be that when it came to Google advertising, you only had to focus on two things. One was the keyword that you bid on. So what keywords were relevant to your business that you'd like to bid on? And then what was the bid or the price that you're willing to pay for that click? Now, when mobile came along, this created a little bit more complexity. So it created more signals for us as marketers that we needed to account for, like device type, time, and location. Now, if we think about where we are today, we can track more of these signals than ever before. And the wide breadth of data creates a lot more complexity as marketers. And so if we think about 10 years ago, to take advantage of all these different signals out there and to do that manually, that can be a daunting process. And so while this has added a lot more complexity, and as I mentioned, it's added a lot more opportunity as well. So we believe that at Google, our biggest opportunity is in the smallest moments of intent and assistance. And so what does this mean? And what is Google doing about it? So we talked about how consumers are being more curious, more demanding, and more impatient, and that each user's journey is different across the board. So that's why we are reinventing the ways that you can engage with your customers based on the data and information that we know now. So to take a step back and think about why is this relevant to Google, and what role does Google play in all of this? Now, if we think about Google.com and Google search, there are 3.5 billion searches that happen on Google on a daily basis. And furthermore, 50% of those searches on every day are actually brand new searches that no one has ever seen on Google before. So
did you say 50 or 15? 15%. Wow, it's still a lot out of 3.5 million.
Yeah, 15%. And so that makes it harder for us as marketers to capture those searches and provide relevant information at each of those touch points. Now, in addition to that, Google within itself does have 7 properties that have over 1 billion active users. And so what this means is in the scope of the Google world, we have expansive reach, and it also gives us a vast amount of real-time data signals that you as a business and as a marketer can leverage in your campaigns, but also that Google can leverage within its tools to help us to work smarter and more strategically as we think through what type of campaign strategy is going to work best for us. And so to also give you a scope of, we have all these properties, but also as it relates to more of the marketing funnel, is we have solutions across every stage of the marketing funnel that can help you to, drive, upper funnel brand awareness, or even to capture intent and bring people in that are highly relevant to your business. And so at the layer of all of these tools across, YouTube, Google search, and the display network, and what Google has done to evolve in being able to capture all this data and make our lives easier as marketers is something we call smart bidding. So smart bidding is the revolution of what used to be typical manual bidding. So as I mentioned before, it used to be you had to bid manually for every single keyword, and it was a very tactical, time-consuming process. And so what Google found is, many advertisers were churning, or there was a gap in the knowledge and the resources of how do you really run an effective campaign, and how do I bid on the terms and the audiences that are actually going to lead to revenue for my business. Smart bidding was the resolution to that.
So just to clear things up for everybody, this is the machine learning, like secret stuff. Smart bidding is what makes everything easier for startups to work on Google Ads. This is like the starting point. We did a lot of intense stuff, but this is the meat stuff that is very important. So if you have questions, ask them, and I'll let Paul continue on the process.
Thanks, Justin. So when you think about when we're getting to start a campaign on Google Ads or any platform, the first step you have to ask yourself is, what is my goal? Is my goal to capture signups? Is it to gain visibility? Is it to capture leads? And so as Google, we thought about what are the goals of our marketers, and how can we, rather than focusing on, this, search auction bidding, how can we help marketers and businesses and startups to be able to launch campaigns that are in line with their goals? And so what you'll see here on this slide is an example of all the different bidding strategies that are available based on consumer goals. And so I'll talk through each of these and for one, and then speak to some of the complexities of how some of these work in a little bit more detail. But if we see, if your goal is visibility as a business, target impression share is a bidding strategy, meaning we'll try to, your campaign will try to show up as much as it possibly can, and it'll optimize towards visibility. Second, if your goal is really to drive traffic to your business, you can use maximize clicks. Now, the last two are the two that I really want to focus on. And what really is sort of the meat and potatoes of smart bidding within itself is how, for one, when you think about your website or your business, what are the key actions that are the most valuable to your business that if you were to set up a campaign today would be your ideal focus? And so that then becomes the target that you look to drive. And so if our goal is to maximize conversions and maximize sales, we have a bidding strategy that can help us to do that. And that could be signing up leads. It could be driving sales, and it could be even, email subscriptions and things like that. And so
we have a question from Francine asking if there's ever a scenario where you recommend manual bidding over smart bidding.
Yeah, Francine, that's a really good question. So where I typically start when I'm working with clients, if we are budget capped, and let's say, cash flow is very sensitive when we need to maintain a good pulse on cost. I'll start off with enhanced CPC bidding, enhanced cost per click bidding, because what that will allow us to do is keep a pulse on the cost, but it'll also give us an opportunity to ramp up and start capturing conversions at a lower cost. And so we'll get into this on our next slide, but when we're first getting started, our account doesn't have any data to go off of. And we think about smart bidding, it's really running on machine learning. So machine learning being able to identify the patterns that are congruent with those that are likely to convert on our site. So in a certain scenario, when I'm first getting started out, I think doing enhanced CPC bidding, which is sort of the evolution of the regular manual bidding, which allows us to fluctuate our cost per click based on a max bid that we're willing to cover. So I don't have a slide necessarily speaking to enhanced CPC bidding, but if you have more questions about that, we can obviously share more resources about that. But if you are going to consider using it, my recommendation would be start out with enhanced CPC, and then think about once you start getting enough conversion volume in the account, graduating to either a target CPA, which is essentially saying, let's get as many conversions as possible at a set cost per acquisition or cost per action. Or if we have more cash flow, considering doing maximized conversions.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. For the sake of time, we'll keep it moving.
Perfect. So the evolution of what we might do following what we do with in terms of the progression of bidding strategies and what we typically do, it'll go from enhanced cost per click to target CPA or maximize conversions, or a maximize conversions to target CPA. And then once we start being able to pull conversion value data into the account, and let's say you're an e-commerce business by chance, then you could consider doing a target return on ad spend, or a maximized conversion value, which is focusing more so on that bottom line. So I realize there's a lot that I just threw out. So I'll jump over to this next slide to kind of spell out what we're ultimately looking to accomplish and what we should really consider before we even make any changes to a bidding strategy. So really, what does this all look like? So if we think about rating the prospects of our business, A as in the best, B as in, okay, these are okay, and C as low quality. When we're first getting started and we don't have data in the account, it's going to be a lot of volume coming in and not necessarily high quality volume. So when we're first getting started, we don't have a lot of data. Maybe we're able to capture one conversion or two. And so there's not a lot for the machine learning to really do to understand, okay, which of these prospects should I be going after more? And we find that as we continue to run the campaigns, as we continue to use the smart bidding solutions, we're able to then start identifying which prospects are higher value to my business, to where over time, as it continues to learn and grow, we're able to see more of what you're seeing over here on the right, which is a more optimized, smart machine that is better identifying the searches, the keywords, the inputs that are more likely to lead to someone who's going to convert on your website. So what this looks like at an ad level, and so I hope this covers off on what we're really looking to see from how is the smart bidding technology really working. So how is it all layered into the actual solutions within Google? So first place I'd like to start is going to be on search. So with traditional search ads, you'd have to create a new ad each time you wanted to test a new certain headline or to see if a new description was working. But what if you could upload different versions of your ads and let the system determine which combinations perform best. And so that is what we can now do with responsive search ads. So now with responsive search ads, you are actually able to use up to 15 different headlines, up to 4 different descriptions, all within one ad. So rather than having to test a variety of different ads, like the traditional text ads where you have 3 headlines and 2 descriptions, we now have the ability to further optimize the creative based on the best possible performing combination. And so what this is doing is every time these ads serve, it's switching up the combination. And as we start to capture more data within the account, over time, we're able to see which combination of headlines and descriptions actually leads to a higher click-through rate. And so what we typically recommend with businesses who are standing up search campaigns is try a couple of different regular text ads and then test that with a responsive search ad. And so what that will allow you to do is see firsthand how the creative and the automation is working compared to the typical static ads. And then as we evolve over time, we recommend looking at, what are your highest performing components, and then adding in the replacing the low performing components with new creative and new copy. And so what we find is over time that by using responsive search ads, we do see a significant lift in the performance when it comes to the click-through rate and getting people on site. But we also find that our creative becomes a lot better as we are able to see, what's working and what's not.
Paul, we were asked a question in the chat about budget. Is there a minimum budget needed to run responsive search ads or any of the other formats that you are going to be talking about?
Great question. So there is no minimum to run any campaign or any ad type on Google search or on any of the or display or YouTube as well. That being said, what the budget allows you to do is it allows you to perhaps accelerate the learning a little bit more quickly. So to stop and kind of speak to this a little bit more, as a business, you may find that, either A, you have, an extensive marketing budget ready and built out, or you may find that like, hey, we're just getting started. We don't have a lot of cash to be expending on marketing right now. Either case, you can get started on Google Ads with any of the formats that we're going to be discussing today. The reality is, however, when we think about automation, the more data we have, the better optimized ads are going to be. And so you still be able to take advantage of utilizing responsive search ads, and the learning is still going to take place. But when it comes to the timeline of getting to a place where we are, more so fully optimized, and I'll even jump back a couple slides to speak to this a little bit more. This process can take a bit longer depending on how much budget you have behind. So to answer your question, we can use a smaller budget, but it'll just take time. And so with that expectation, you'll still get, and you still move from left to right. It just may take a little bit more time.
So any budget's possible. The smaller the budget, the more time it takes to learn. The bigger the budget, the less time it takes to learn to see better results.
Mm-hmm. In either case or where you fall in the spectrum, we always caution new advertisers to look at the first, few months, maybe in the first half of a year, to really think about investing in the learning that's going to take place for you to get fully ramped up. And so with my team in particular, we work with brands specifically for 3 to 6 months. And so what we do in that time is, for one, think about what kind of campaign structure do we need to implement that's going to be ideal for our strategy. 2, what types of optimizations and testing do we need to run for us to start to build out this model for us to reach a fully scaled up or a much more well-oiled machine. So the goal in the initial space should be focus on learning, focus on capturing initial results and driving up baseline signals to whereby, as you start to progress and you start to capture more data and the campaigns become a lot smarter at identifying high value customers, in the end, that long-term investment, we see that pay off time and time again.
Awesome. For the sake of time, Paul, I know we only got 20 minutes left, and I know we got Snap Travel also online, so we'll keep it going, and I'll hold questions off to let you breeze through some of these different tools.
Perfect. Yeah, so I apologize. I know we have a lot of content to cover today, so we'll go right through this, and if there's any follow-up questions towards the end, Justin and I will be hanging around to answer any questions as well. So let's go a little step further on search. So what if, in addition to being able to identify the permutations between ad headlines and descriptions, we were able to lead users to the most relevant landing pages of your website without actually using keywords at all? So that's been the development that has come with dynamic search ads. So let's say you're a business and you have a lot of content on your website. Maybe you're an e-commerce business and you have a ton of products that you sell. It can be really difficult to set up a campaign to capture all the queries related to the products or services that you offer. So with dynamic search ads, we're talking about a much more automated campaign. And so what you're able to do is, rather than picking keywords, is you're able to specify the web pages that you would like to choose. And then when the user types in a query, you're able to find, Google is able to find the best page that matches that query, surface an ad dynamically using the content on your website for the headline and the description, and also set that specific landing page or destination URL in real time. So what this provides is a way for us to add automation across the board to where we're not worried about keyword strategy and ad copy and targeting, and is more so taking care of a lot of components that we don't have to. So what we typically see, and what are some of the key benefits of dynamic search ads, is, for one, performance. We see with especially companies or websites that have a lot of content on them, this can be a great way for driving higher ROI, saving on time and efficiency, having coverage for all the possible relevant keywords, but also still giving you control to be able to determine, set manual bids or certain bids for certain keywords or certain search queries, and even set up exclusions as well. So as you get into maybe exploring dynamic search ads a little bit more, you'll find that while it is automated, there's still an element of control that you can still keep a pulse on. So we understand that a lot of people spend time maybe searching for stuff on Google, but we also recognize that a lot of people don't spend their time just wandering on Google search, but they actually spend time across the different websites across the internet. And so if we think about it, 96% of all time spent outside of a website outside of Google search, takes place across websites, mobile, YouTube, Gmail, social networks, all over the place. And so that's why we have the Google Display Network that acts as an opportunity for us to engage with consumers all across these various properties. And so one of the solutions that Google's developed to help us do that even more efficiently has been smart display campaigns. So with smart display campaigns, they leverage 3 different components. One being smart creatives, another being smart bidding, and another being smart targeting. Well, this sounds like a lot of smart stuff, but what does that actually mean? So with smart creatives, what you're able to do is essentially, rather than having to build out your own static ads and they have to be cut to a specific size and they have to be all these perfect dimensions, what we're able to do is you're able to provide Google with images, logos, headlines, and descriptions. And Google is then able to test billions of combinations to get the right message for the right user at the right time. And so what this also allows us to do is, since we're not only thinking about having to serve in these select inventory slots on websites, and they have the ability to change, is our inventory expands tremendously. Second being the smart bidding piece, we're relatively familiar with that now. And then 3, when it comes to something specific to smart display campaigns, is the smart targeting as well. So typically with display campaigns, we have the ability to maybe leverage some of the smart creative component with responsive display ads, but we're typically doing the audience targeting manually. And so what smart display is doing is it's actually taking care of the targeting itself by looking across all possible audiences to determine which audiences are going to be the most high value to the business. And as you start to capture more and more of that data, and you start to bring more customers in through smart display campaigns, the performance continues to improve over time. Hence, all the use of smart for these campaigns. And so what we can see here also, and another key benefit, is smart display campaigns, they can reach across all types of properties, from Gmail to Display Network to YouTube, and even on partner sites. And what you can see here is they actually look a lot more native and much more appealing given the content of the website that they're on. So what you'll see is no display ads will typically be the same, just because they'll naturally and dynamically change based on the content of the website. So that way it looks a lot more aesthetic to the viewer. What we've seen in terms of the results that we've been able to drive is, I won't speak into this a little bit into too much detail, but we can see that when we do implement smart creatives and smart display and responsive display ads, we see a significant improvement compared to traditional avenues that we typically do on display. And even as much as 50% more conversions across the board. So this is just broadly speaking to how much of an advantage it has to have that element of automation within the campaigns. So for our e-commerce advertisers and for those businesses that are selling products online, there's also been a lot of advantages within our shopping campaigns themselves. So it used to be for shopping campaigns, your only option was maybe an example of what you see over here on the right, or excuse me, on the left-hand side. You can show a product, it's on Google Shopping, maybe it shows up when I search for a product on Google search. But now with Smart Shopping we've been able to expand beyond that and provide an opportunity to target customers, not just on search, but on the display network, on YouTube and Gmail. And one of the pieces of functionality that we're able to leverage because of this is dynamic remarketing. So if any of you have ever shopped for a product online and then you went somewhere else and then you saw maybe an example over here on the display on another website or on YouTube, you saw that exact product you looked at showed up on that landing page. That's an element of dynamic remarketing, is being able to show and surface the products that people have already shown interest in, and then being able to remarket them on other channels. And so with Smart Shopping, what we're able to do is marry two sets of insights. One being the Google Insights related to the queries, devices, location, and marry that with your e-commerce and retail insights, your audience lists, your sales, your price and basket size. And so what we find is when we run Smart Shopping campaigns is that we do see a significant lift in what we're able to do just due to the machine learning alone. And so while we're not able to see it happening on the front end, in the back end, the machine learning is looking at all these different signals to help you surface the right products in front of the right customers, taking into consideration maybe which customers are showing interest in certain products, and being able to retarget them with products that they might actually show an interest in as well. And so what we see across the board is when we run smart shopping campaigns compared to the traditional shopping campaigns, it's more to the 30% increase in conversion value. And so just speaking to what we ultimately see with smart shopping is, and what should be expected with running any campaign running on smart bidding, is at first, it may take some manual work and it may take some time for the campaign to really ramp up. But as it starts to capture more data, we see that week over week, month over month, we can start to see performance improve.
Hey, Paul, before we jump into YouTube, you want to forward, let's get Snap Travel on to get an example, because I think these guys did a great job with our smart bidding, and I would love to get them on to discuss. If you could skip over the YouTube section, and we'll get David on here to talk.
Sure, let's do that.
Perfect. And we'll get back to this, and don't worry, we'll be sending out the deck too for people to take a look and ask questions if we miss YouTube. But if you go to the next slide, Paul, we'll bring David on here. And Snap Travel, for those of you that don't know, they operate as a travel agent over messaging, allowing users to book hotels easily via Facebook Messenger and or text. They participated in a Google for Startups advisor program in Toronto, and basically they had an account manager with them for 3 months on the Google side, and we implemented smart bidding with the goal of obviously increasing revenue over time. But we have the analytics lead for Snap Travel here, David Murray. David, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having me, to you and everyone else.
Awesome, man. Yeah, if you don't mind, can you shed some light on kind of the experience you have with smart bidding and how it worked for Snap Travel?
Yeah, so we've been an advertising partner with Google for well over a year now. We started in January 2019, and we did manual advertising for about a year until the start of this year. We were skeptical at first about how well our account managers could manage, or how Google could manage a travel-specific advertising campaign. We felt like we knew travel and we knew our users kind of better than another company. So we were pretty skeptical at first. Eventually, we came around to the idea of at least testing it. The process from when we wanted to join to when we actually launched the campaign was about 1 or 2 months. The biggest blockers there were setting up that conversion tracking. So Paul, you did a good job of kind of outlining the 4 different strategies. Our strategy was really to drive revenue. We didn't really care about brand awareness. We didn't really care about clicks to our website. We only cared about a customer if they booked. And Google obviously didn't know the value of a user to us until we started handing over our revenue numbers to Google. And that was kind of a big blocker for us originally. We didn't want to do that. But in the end, what we found was we set it up. We started giving Google our revenue numbers, and they were able to use those conversions and use the data that they have about the user and the user's intent to optimize our marketing campaign, and actually increased our revenue by about 40%. All else equal. We didn't change our inventory. We didn't change any different locales. All else equal, we turned it on, and within a week, our revenue had gone up by about 40%.
Amazing. How long have you guys had it running since then?
So we actually launched it in the middle of now quarantine. So we launched at the beginning of April, and we found obviously there's been a huge decrease in top of funnel traffic for travel specifically, but controlling for that, we found the Google algo to work well, and we don't really see a world where we would ever go back to our own manual bidding, because Google knows the user so well that it's just not something that we as a company will ever be able to do better than.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's wild too, especially during quarantine, that you're growing revenue for a travel vertical, especially.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, David, Paul, I don't know if you had one last question. Sorry, before I let David go.
Yeah, no, David, I was curious with smart bidding, what strategy did you start out with?
Yeah, good question. So we were gonna start with the enhanced CPC to your point, because we asked a couple questions about the Google algo, and we didn't feel that it took into account all the data that we needed, being a travel specific company. Turns out that didn't matter. It didn't matter that it didn't do all the travel specific stuff. It still did really well. So we were going to start the enhanced CPC because we felt like we knew our business. In the end, there were some blockers there, so we just went straight to the rev share. I don't know what you called it. I think it was the CPA agreement, and it's worked quite well.
Yeah, the target CPA.
Yeah.
Awesome, perfect. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for hopping on. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for giving insights, Dave. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks a lot for putting on the presentation, guys.
You got it, man. We'll see you soon.
See you.
Cool.
All right. So there's just a quick example of how smart bidding can actually change the campaign for a startup. And then David's in our network, so that was awesome to hear. We got a couple questions coming in, Paul, that I think are pretty good before we get back to YouTube. And if we miss YouTube, I think the questions are actually better. But can you explain the difference between conducting B2B versus B2C campaigns with smart bidding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. So B2B versus B2C campaigns. So for one, it's going to be different depending on the business model. I'm assuming, Susan, you mean by lead gen. Really, the primary differences are going to be, for one, the principles are still going to be the same. You're going to have a target audience. You're going to still be able to leverage the smart bidding and leverage all these different campaign types. It's just a matter of what might work best given your industry and given the way your consumers purchase. So for instance, someone who offers personal loans, it may be a very different business model if you are a tech startup. And so in that sense, the principles are still the same. As a B2B consumer, your targeting is going to be much more narrow and focused. So thinking about when it comes to Google search, what are the keywords that you are going to be most relevant to that audience set? So I actually work with a lot of B2B tech companies. And what we see is, for one, it's maxing out on where the intent is. So thinking about what we discussed on search and leveraging some of those strategies, where you can also be helpful with, providing information to those audiences. Maybe if they're doing research, or there's blog pages that you can drive them to. That stuff that can be helpful. Whereas with consumers, and assuming, depending on if there's a niche or what the market is, you're going to have a lot more you're potentially going to have a larger audience set to serve for in a B2C world. And so really what it comes down to is just considering, what are the ways you can get closest to that B2B decision maker, whether it be through keyword targeting or through audience targeting on display and YouTube.
Awesome. And then we have another question coming in. How does one get a Google account manager? That is a great question. Most of the time, it is based on a portfolio and you're already internal to Google on spend, but we do have an application we'll be sending out after this presentation in an email where you could sign up to request account management support from a guy like Paul or other account strategists in the network. The caveat to that is we do have a limited supply of manpower, so it will be obviously maxed out eventually. So if you don't get in, we'll still talk to you. We'll still see what you're doing with your marketing campaigns, but we will have specifically account managers working with startups, and you can sign up in an email afterwards. All right. I think that is the last question we got. So we only have 3 minutes left. I know we've missed YouTube for Action. Paul, I don't know if you want to skim through it or if you want to just, we could put some notes afterwards in the follow-up.
Yeah, I think we could cover off a portion of it, and then anything else afterwards we can share information about.
You got it, man. Let you take lead.
Okay. Jump back here. So really just covering off on, what are the solutions that YouTube provides? And if you're thinking about YouTube, you may think that it is a brand awareness first platform, and it very well is true. It's a place where people search for content, and it's a place for you to introduce people to your brand. And so what Google has done now is provided a means for brands to not only drive awareness, but also to drive performance and action through YouTube. And so that's why the the name of the product is YouTube for Action. So this provides a place where you can actually introduce people to your business and introduce them, highlight key product features. If you're a SaaS company, you can do an explainer video to talk more about your business, and then in real time you're able to give them the option to click through to your website. And similarly to the other campaign types that we discussed, you can actually use this as a means of driving action to your business, whether it be conversions or clicks on site, or even driving people to a store location. And so what we see here, and even if you're a lead gen company, and something this is actually fairly new, is the ability to fill out form fills on a YouTube ad, which is another piece of functionality that we offer now. And additionally, if you are a consumer product or a consumer good that is sold in stores, or you even own your own retail locations, we have location extensions and affiliate location extensions that can integrate with Google Maps to allow you as a business to get insight into if people are clicking or calling for directions, looking at store hours, reading reviews, or even navigating to that website. That is something that is now integrated and viewable within YouTube now. So
Awesome.
that sort of takes us to the end.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for going through the YouTube really quick, Paul. I know that there's a lot more content in there, but thank you everyone for joining. Just some key takeaways to remember. Assistant intent is more complex than ever before, as Paul was saying. Our counter to that at Google is smart bidding. So it's our machine learning platform and bidding based on your marketing goals. So once you have your goal, the bidding will do the rest for you. And then the last thing is the tools and resources that we showed you today are very beneficial for you as a startup, regardless of budget. Just remember, the only thing about budget is that it's correlates with time. The more budget you have, the less time it takes for the algorithm to learn, and vice versa. But understand how you set it up is the biggest thing, and know what it takes for that. And if you go to the next steps, Paul, we can say that we'll show you again that we have a form coming out if you need help onboarding. You could fill out the application, and we'll get back to you within a couple weeks. Join our webinar next week for building your brand on YouTube. And the last thing is, if you want more product sessions, you can actually visit adsonair.withgoogle.com. It's a new Ads on Air we're doing for advertisers in the quarantine life. And there's new and upcoming live events, but you can also watch all the past events on demand if you register. So thank you everyone for coming out. Really appreciate it. And any follow-up questions, again, I'll be sending out an email so you could follow up directly with me on that, and we'll be happy to answer them. And thanks, Paul, for presenting. Really appreciate all the insights here.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me. Everyone, thank you for coming. Are we still fielding any questions, or are we?
Yeah, we could sit around for 2 seconds if anyone wants to stay past and ask any questions. We do have one here from Tim and Doug. They're from New Zealand, retail e-commerce business with a small product range. Can you please tell which campaign would be best, smart shopping or smart display?
Great question. So in this case, I would do smart shopping. For e-commerce businesses, display, it's going to be more mid-funnel. And so what I would think about is, what are you seeing other e-commerce advertisers doing? And so I'd say smart shopping is going to be your bread and butter. Second is, if you're trying to get your brand out there, what are the ways that you can, introduce people to your brand, whether it be potentially on Google search. So thinking about what are the products that you offer that you might be able to show up for. But even then, what I might suggest is, outside of driving performance, I might recommend seeing if there's a way that you guys can do any type of video content to really start to get people to know your brand. So that way you can get people searching for your brand more organically.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. And thanks, Tim and Doug, for the question. We have, is the YouTube solutions more expensive than smart bidding?
Yeah, Angie, that's a good question. So smart bidding is, and I think I may have botched this a little bit, so I apologize, but smart bidding is really what's at the core of all of these different solutions that we discussed today. So they're not one is more expensive than the other. However, you will get different kinds of results depending on the campaign type and what your goal is and what your focus is. So kind of an ambiguous answer, but they're really all the same. With YouTube, for instance, that's typically going to be measured on a cost per view basis, whereas something on Google search or display is going to be more on cost per click.
Gotcha. So smart bidding, to summarize, smart bidding is just the machine learning that goes on. The solutions are totally different, and that's like the responsive search versus YouTube. You're saying searches will be cost per click and YouTube will be cost per view most of the time.
That's correct. Yeah. With the bidding strategy, you're essentially setting the rules of the game. And then what it comes down to is, based on these solutions, what are the places in my customer's journey that I can be, and what makes sense for my business? And so, is your goal to really drive sales, or is your goal really to go out and prospect, find new people, bring them into the fold, or really to cast a wide net and introduce people to your brand new product or service?
Got it. Good question. All right. Seems like we are out of questions. We're good to go. So thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate it. And look forward to having you guys sign up for some support. And thanks again, Paul, for giving us all the insights.
Thanks, guys.
All right. We'll see you guys later. Have a good rest of your day. Stay safe and stay healthy.